Hello, welcome to another episode of Taste of 1914 from Doon Heritage Village. I know that some of you have been trying home baking and getting frustrated when you can't find yeast or flour. Well, today's recipe does have some flour but no yeast. We're making potato rolls. So the main ingredient are potatoes, and they help substitute for some of the flour. The recipe calls for 5 large potatoes. But what is large? I have this size, and this size, and this size. So this is what I think of as large, but I don't have 5 of them. So I'm going to kind of guesstimate and maybe put those 2 together, and this one, and this one, and this one, and call that 5. It's a pretty flexible recipe. So the first thing you need to do is to pare your potatoes. And I'm calling it paring because in 1914, most people aren't going to be peeling. They're using their paring knife to pare their potatoes. And here in the village, those potato skins are something that the pigs will really enjoy. And of course, people pride themselves on taking very thin parings. You can always use a peeler. So what you're going to need next is to actually boil these potatoes so that they're soft enough to mash. So I've got a pot full of water, cold water. Root vegetables always go into cold water. And I've done this a lot, so I'm just going to cut them over the pot and drop them in. Smallish chunks, they cook faster. You can always cut this on a cutting board. It's a lot safer. And you're going to do all your 5 potatoes right into the pot. Add a little salt, get it boiling, and boil until soft. You'll know they're soft when you can put a fork or your knife right into them, and it goes all the way through easily. So while the potatoes are boiling, let's talk about the other ingredients that you'll need. You need a quart of flour. Now what's a quart? Well, that's about 4 cups of flour. I have mine in a crock here. I also need a teacup full of milk. So that's going to be my cup, just a little less. And finally, salt. Doesn't say how much. This is personal taste. So I'll probably be adding a few pinches of salt. Depends on how salty my potatoes are as well. So I've started to mash the potatoes, but they do need more. It's a lot better if it's smooth. They're still nice and warm. This is just like mashing potatoes at home. If you have one of those stick blenders, you could use that. Depends on how smooth you want your mashed potatoes in the end. I don't mind a few chunks, both when I'm eating mashed potatoes or in these potato rolls that we're making. All right, the potatoes are mashed, and the recipe says 5 large potatoes mashed while warm. These are certainly still warm. Can you see them steaming away there? I'm going to add it to my big bowl. There we go. And now I'm going to add the milk. So I have my teacup full of milk that I'm going to add. You can use an alternative milk if you'd like. With these potato rolls, it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to mix that around till it's nice and smooth. And this is a good time to add your seasoning. So I'm going to start adding some salt. At this point, you might want to give it a little taste to see if you've added enough salt. So I'm going to add 4 cups of flour. I find it's best if I mix a little bit between additions. So that was 1 cup, 2 cups. Mix it around. Okay, I'm going to add another cup of flour. And depending on the texture and how moist your potatoes are, you may not want to add the entire 4 cups of flour. You don't have to knead this at all, but I'm just going to use my hands to mix it up. Basically it says stir until light, make into rolls. what size is that? And I've experimented a bit, and I find if I make them around this size, sort of a little smaller than a tennis ball, a little bigger than a golf ball, that that works pretty well. But you might want to do a test pan. You're going to grease your pan and then start placing your balls, and they don't rise too much. And you'll keep going until you've got all your dough made into balls. And then they need to rest for 2 hours. So you cover it with a tea towel, put it someplace a little bit warm, not hot, and let them rest. While we're waiting for the rolls to rest for 2 hours, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the recipe. Potato roll recipe comes from the new Galt Cookbook, and that was published in 1898 over in Galt, Cambridge today. And the recipe contributor is Mrs. Capron. That's Anna Scott originally, and she married Joseph Capron. Both of them lived in Galt. She was born in 1857, and they lived their whole lives there in Galt. So it's a typical recipe you might have found in this area in 1914. Shall we see how it looks? Take off the cover. There they are. So they've been resting for 2 hours. They often dry out a little bit on top, but that's okay. Or you could brush some oil or butter on top. It's time to put them in the oven. So this is about half the rolls, but we're going to start baking them in the oven. And at probably 375 is good. In the oven. And I start checking after about 30 minutes. Depends on the size of your rolls. So the potato rolls have been baking for over 30 minutes. I'm just going to check again, but I think they're ready. They're nice and steamy, and if I just touch it, it's feeling like they're done. So I think it's time to taste. Will you join me? So why don't you join me in a potato roll? Let's see how they've turned out. I'm gonna break one open, nice and warm. It's steamy. Spread a little butter on just. They don't really need it, but when don't we need some butter on things? Join me with a cup of tea here at Doon Heritage Village for a taste of 1914. Hope we'll see you soon.